Welcome to Vesper Shroud, the place where ordinary people whisper the darkest truths. And the night always feels a little too still. Tonight, we wander deep into the Appalachian mountains, an endless stretch of ridges and hollers where shadows move like they're alive, and silence carries more weight than words. These mountains are ancient, older than memory itself, and they've soaked up centuries of stories. Campfire warnings, roadside terrors, and encounters so unexplainable, they stay with you long after you've left. The tales you're about to hear aren't fiction. They come from real people, passed down through locals, or lived firsthand under the canopy of those haunted hills. If you're drawn to true horrors and mysteries, make sure you subscribe and tap the bell. That way, you'll never miss when the night decides to whisper again. Now, keep your light close, because the first story begins just beyond the tree line. Story 1. Cursed Bloodline of the Appalachian Witch. I am the 7th generation, and the madness is coming for me just like it came for all the others. My name is Sarah Hartwell, and for 300 years, my family has carried a curse that twists one soul from each generation into something unrecognizable. Not death. Death would be mercy. This is something worse. A slow unraveling of sanity, accompanied by voices that whisper truths no living person should know, and objects that move with invisible hands, and a presence that follows you like a shadow you can to shake. I have 6 months left, maybe less, before I become what my great-aunt Eleanor became, what my great-great-grandfather Thomas became, what every 7th generation has become since 1724. I am 39 years old. I teach high school English in Boone, North Carolina. I have a mortgage, a cat named Fitzgerald, and a coffee habit that costs more than my car payment. I am normal. Or I was, until 3 months ago when the voices started and I found my kitchen chairs stacked in a perfect pyramid at 3 in the morning. The curse ISN. To a myth. It is documented. My family has kept journals for generations, each chosen one recording their descent into madness with clinical precision until the words become gibberish and the pages fill with drawings that make your eyes hurt to look at. I read them all now, every terrifying account, and I understand with sick certainty that I am next. Let me tell you how this horror began, because you need to understand the depth of hatred required to curse an entire bloodline for 3 centuries. In 1723, my ancestor Jedediah Hartwell and 6 other men from the settlement of Harmon Creek accused a woman named Abigail Crane of witchcraft. She lived alone in the mountains, grew herbs, delivered babies, and had a way with healing that the settlement doctor envied. When a fever swept through Harmon Creek that winter and killed 12 children, the men needed someone to blame. Abigail was convenient. They dragged her from her cabin in February, bound her hands, stripped her naked to search for witch marks, found a birthmark on her shoulder and called it proof of Satan's touch. They didn't burn her. That was too quick, too merciful. Instead, they tied her to a tree at the edge of the settlement and left her to freeze to death over 3 days. The journals say she didn't scream, didn't beg. Just watch them with eyes that burned with an intelligence that terrified them more than any curse she might have spoken. On the 3rd day, as she drew her last breaths, she finally spoke. Not to all of them, just to Jedediah Hartwell, the man who led the accusation. She told him that his bloodline would never know peace, that every 7th generation, one of his descendants would suffer as she had suffered. Not in body, but in mind. They would be tormented by forces they couldn't see. Driven mad by voices they couldn't silence, isolated and accused just as she had been. And it would continue until the bloodline ended or until one of them had the courage to break the curse. Jedediah laughed at her, watched her die, went home to his wife and 6 children and forgot about Abigail Crane. Until his youngest son, Jacob, turned 16 and started screaming about invisible hands touching him in the night. The pattern established itself quickly. Jacob heard voices telling him the secret sins of everyone in the settlement. Objects moved in his presence. Doors slammed. Furniture overturned. He knew things he shouldn't, saw things that hadn't happened yet. The settlement, still paranoid from the witch trials, turned on him, called him possessed, tried to exorcise the demons. Jacob hanged himself at 19 to make the voices stop. Jedediah finally understood that Abigail's curse was real. He tried everything to break it. Consulted priests, traveled to Philadelphia to meet with scholars, even sought out other folk healers in the mountains. Nothing worked. The curse was bound to his bloodline, and it would continue. 7 generations have passed since Jacob. 7 chosen ones who descended into madness. My father kept all the journals in a locked trunk in our basement. He showed them to me on my 39th birthday, the age when the curse typically manifests. Told me I needed to prepare. Told me that I was the 7th generation from the last chosen one, which meant I was next. I didn't believe him. Called it superstition. Anxiety. A self-fulfilling prophecy fueled by centuries of family trauma. I threw myself into work, into normal life, determined to prove that curses weren't real. Then the voices started. It began with whispers at the edge of hearing. Soft murmurs when I was alone in my classroom after school. Words I couldn't quite make out, but that filled me with a deep, unsettling dread. I told myself it was stress. Tinnitus. My imagination working overtime after reading those disturbing journals. But the whispers grew clearer, started speaking in full sentences. And the things they told me were impossible to dismiss. They told me that my colleague Marcus was having an affair with a student. Gave me dates, locations, details. I reported it anonymously, and the investigation proved every word true. They told me which of my students were being abused at home, which ones were planning violence, which ones wouldn't live to graduation. And they were always right. Always. I tried to use the knowledge for good at first, made anonymous reports, intervened when I could, but the voices multiplied, grew louder, started telling me things I didn't want to know. Deaths that were coming, diseases people were hiding, the secret cruelties humans inflict on each other in the darkness. And then the objects started moving. It began small, my keys appearing in places I hadn't left them, books falling from shelves when I walked past, the cat hissing at empty corners. But it escalated quickly, doors slamming in the middle of the night, the furniture rearranging itself while I slept. One morning I woke to find every photograph in my house turned face down, like whatever presence shared my space couldn't bear to look at them. The terror of living in a house that is no longer under your control is indescribable. You can feel safe, to relax. Every creak is a threat. Every shadow might be something watching. And the worst part is knowing that if you tell anyone, they will think you're crazy. I'll recommend therapy and medication and rest, and none of it will help because the problem isn't in your head. It's real. It's there. It's happening. I started sleeping in my car, staying late at school, anywhere but home. But the activity followed me. Objects moved in my classroom. The voices grew so loud I could barely hear real people talking. Students started avoiding me because I blurted out their secrets without meaning to. The things the voices told me would just spill out of my mouth before I could stop them. I took a leave of absence from work, told them I needed to deal with a family emergency, which was technically true. Then I did what every chosen one in my family has done. I went into the mountains looking for answers. Abigail Crane, his cabin is long gone, but I knew where it had stood. My great-aunt Eleanor's journal included a map sheet drawn during her own descent, before the voices convinced her to walk into the forest and never come back. I hiked 3 miles up an overgrown trail to a clearing where the foundation stone still marked where a life had been lived and destroyed. The presence grew stronger there. The voices became a roar. I fell to my knees in that clearing and begged Abigail Crane, the spirit, for mercy. Apologized for what my ancestor had done. Promised to do whatever it took to break the curse. The voices fell silent for the first time in weeks. And in that sudden, shocking quiet, I heard a single voice. Clear and cold and ancient. It told me the curse couldn't be broken. That Abigail Crane, his hatred had been so pure, so absolute, that it had transcended death and woven itself into the fabric of my bloodline. But there was a way to end it. One way, the bloodline had to end. The last Hartwell had to ensure there would be no 8th generation. I have no children, never wanted them, but I have siblings. My brother David has 3 kids. My sister Rebecca has 2. The bloodline continues through them. And according to the voice in that clearing, one of their children, his children, will be the next chosen one. The curse will claim another soul in 7 generations unless I do something to stop it. The voice told me what Abigail Crane demands. A life for a life. My ancestor took hers. She wants one of his descendants to take their own. Willingly, as an offering, as penance. And in exchange, the curse ends. No more voices, no more madness. No more chosen ones driven to insanity or suicide. I left the clearing without answering, drove back to Boone, tried to resume my life. But the activity has intensified. Yesterday, I woke up to find words carved into my bedroom wall. Not scratched, carved, deep gouges in the drywall. done silently while I slept 3 feet away. The word said, decide. I've been researching, trying to find another way. I contacted paranormal investigators, occult experts, priests who specialize in curses. Most think I'm delusional. The few who believe me say the same thing. Blood curses this old, this powerful, can to be broken by conventional means. They require sacrifice. They require blood. My family doesn't, the chosen one yet. I've hidden it from them. But soon they, notice. Soon I, start behaving like Eleanor did. Like Thomas did, like all the others. I, become erratic, violent, unpredictable. I, hurt people without meaning to because the voices will demand it. And eventually, like most of them, I, end my own life anyway. But without the curse being broken, it will all happen again in 7 generations. So I am faced with an impossible choice. Die now, on my own terms, and end 300 years of suffering. Or fight it, try to survive, knowing I'm just delaying the inevitable and condemning another descendant to this nightmare. The voices tell me things about my future if I choose to live. They show me visions. I see myself 5 years from now, locked in a psychiatric facility, restrained to a bed, screaming about invisible hands. I see my family visiting less and less until they stop coming at all. I see decades of torment, of medications that don't work, of doctors who think I'm schizophrenic. I see myself as an old woman, still hearing voices, still being moved like a puppet by invisible forces, waiting for death that takes too long to arrive. Or I can walk into the mountains, find the place where Abigail Crane died, and offer myself as payment for my ancestor, his crime. End it, free my family, ensure no child 7 generations from now has to live through this horror. I have the journals spread out on my kitchen table. 7 generations of chosen ones. 7 stories of descent into madness. 7 different ways people tried to cope with being tormented by forces they couldn't understand or control. Some fought until the end. Some gave in quickly. None of them won. The voices are talking to me right now as I record this. They retelling me I've already made my decision. That I knew what I to choose from the moment I heard the terms. They retelling me the exact tree where Abigail died. The exact method. They re-promising peace, silence, an end to the whispers and the moving objects and the terrible knowledge of things I shouldn't, And the horrifying thing is, I'm listening. I am considering it, because 3 months of this has broken something fundamental in me. I can, imagine living like this for years. Can, imagine becoming what Eleanor became, what Thomas became. Can, imagine knowing that my nephew, or my niece, as daughter, will go through this same nightmare because I was too afraid to end it. But I am also terrified that the curse is lying, that my sacrifice won to end anything, that it is just another trick. Another way for Abigail Crane is hatred to claim another Hartwell life. The voices could be demons, could be my own fractured psyche, could be anything except what they claim to be. I don't, what? It's real anymore. I don't, if I am being haunted or if I genuinely losing my mind. And that is the truly terrifying part of curses like this. They just destroy you. They make you question your own perception of reality until you can. Do you trust anything? Not even your own thoughts. So here, it's my question for you, and I need you to really think about it. If you carried a curse that would torment your descendants for generations, and the only way to break it was to sacrifice yourself, would you do it? Would you trust that the curse would honor its bargain? Or would you fight to survive, even knowing what awaits you and those who come after? Write your answer in the comments, because I need to make a decision soon. The voices are getting louder, and I am running out of time. Story 2. Horrific harvest of the scarecrow cult. I am dying. Not slowly, not over years, but fast enough that my doctors have stopped pretending they know what's wrong with me. I've lost 60 pounds in 8 weeks. My hair comes out in handfuls when I shower. My fingernails have turned black at the tips. My skin is translucent enough that I can see the veins beneath the surface like dark highways running across my body. And I know exactly why this is happening. I know who is responsible. I know I'm going to be dead within a month. It started with a flat tire on Route 40 in rural Oklahoma. I was driving home from a job interview in Dallas, heading north toward Kansas, when my rear left tire blew out with a sound like a gunshot. The road was completely empty. No other cars, no cell signal, Just flat prairies stretching to the horizon in every direction, and the sun beginning its descent toward the distant tree line. I pulled over, grabbed my spare, and started changing the tire. That is when I noticed the scarecrows. They were everywhere, not just a few scattered across the fields. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds, standing in neat rows like a crop being grown instead of harvested. Each scarecrow was crudely constructed from wood and burlap, stuffed with straw, wearing tattered clothes that looked like they'd been hanging in the sun for decades. Their stick arms extended outward. Their burlap heads were tilted at angles that suggested they were watching the road. Watching me. I should have left immediately. Something in my gut was screaming that those scarecrows were wrong, that they represented something disturbing, something dangerous. But I was focused on the tire. I was focused on getting back on the road. I was focused on getting away from this creepy, unsettling place. An old truck pulled up maybe 15 minutes later. A man climbed out, weathered and thin, his face carved from shadow and bone. He asked if I needed help. I said no. He smiled and said that was good. He said people who needed help on this road usually didn't live long enough to get it. Then he drove away without waiting for a response. I finished changing the tire with trembling hands and got back on the road. I didn't look at the scarecrows as I drove past. I didn't look in my rearview mirror. I told myself it was just an old farmer, this dark sense of humor, that there was nothing actually scary about this place. I was wrong. I was completely, catastrophically wrong. The sickness started 3 days later. I woke up one morning feeling hollowed out, empty, like something vital had been removed from inside me during the night. I went to work anyway. I had meetings to attend, clients to call, a life to maintain. By noon, I was sweating through my shirt despite the cool office air. By evening, I was nauseous and burning with fever. I assumed I was catching the flu. I went home and went to bed. I didn't get out of bed for 2 weeks. My primary care doctor ran every test available. Blood work, CT scans, MRI, everything came back normal. He admitted me to the hospital for observation. The hospital doctors were baffled. My body was failing, but there was no infection, no cancer, no disease they could identify. My organs were shutting down systematically, as if someone had simply decided to turn off my life force like flipping a light switch. After a week in the hospital with no diagnosis and no improvement, they released me. They suggested it might be psychological. They suggested I might be experiencing stress or anxiety manifesting as physical symptoms. They prescribed antidepressants and told me to follow up with a therapist. I knew better. I knew something had happened to me on that road in Oklahoma. I knew the scarecrows were involved. I knew it with the same certainty that you know your own name, even though the idea was completely insane. I started researching obsessively. I searched for information about that stretch of road, about the small towns nearby, about any reports of unusual deaths or disappearances. I found nothing at first, but then I discovered an old forum post from 2007, written by someone named David Crane. The post described breaking down on the same road. The post described the scarecrows. The post described the feeling of being watched, the sense that something was fundamentally wrong with that place. David Crane had posted his experience looking for answers. He never posted again. A quick search of public records revealed that David Crane had died in 2008. Cause of death, organ failure, cause unknown. He was 39 years old. I found more deaths following the same pattern. 3 different people over 15 years. All broke down on that same stretch of road. All developed mysterious wasting sicknesses. All dead within 8 to 12 weeks. The pattern was undeniable. The scarecrows were killing people. I drove back to Oklahoma. I know that sounds insane, but I needed answers. I needed to understand what was happening to me before I died. I needed to know if there was any way to stop it. The road looked different in daylight. The scarecrows were less frightening, just crude stick figures in old clothes. But as I drove slowly past them, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. Each scarecrow had personal items attached to its body. A driver, this license tied to the chest with twine, a wedding ring hanging from one arm, a watch attached to the other arm, car keys, a photograph, personal effects that belonged to specific people who be broken down on this road. I stopped the truck and walked to the nearest scarecrow. The driver's license belonged to David Crane. His name was stitched on the back with crude lettering. His photograph was staring out at me from beneath the burlap head. I tore the license off and stuffed it in my pocket. I looked at the other scarecrows and saw more names. Names I recognized from my research. Names of people who died from mysterious wasting sicknesses. I realized with absolute, chilling certainty that the scarecrows weren't just decorations. They were anchors. They were vessels. They contained the personal essence of the people they represented. And as the scarecrows rotted in the sun and rain, as their bodies deteriorated, the people they represented withered away and died. The scarecrows were harvesting life force. I found a scarecrow with items that matched me. A receipt from the gas station where I stopped on the day of the flat tire. A strand of my hair tied to the straw. A photograph that must have been captured on this camera as I changed the tire. My driver, its license, obtained from my truck somehow. The scarecrow looked like it had been constructed recently. It looked fresh and deliberately made to represent me specifically. I destroyed it completely. I tore apart the straw. I ripped the burlap into shreds. I scattered the personal items across the field. I thought maybe destroying the scarecrow would break the connection. I thought maybe I could save myself from the horrifying fate that had claimed David Crane and the others. I was wrong. The sickness didn't stop. If anything, it accelerated. My weight loss became dramatic. Within weeks, I dropped another 30 pounds. My doctors were alarmed enough to readmit me to the hospital. They called in specialists. They discussed experimental treatments. Nothing helped. My body continued to fail. My life force was being drained from me, and I was powerless to stop it. I told a psychiatrist what I believed was happening. I told him about the scarecrows. I told him about the personal items. I told him about the other people who died the same way. He looked at me with pity and increased my psychiatric medications. He suggested that my mind had created an elaborate explanation for my illness as a coping mechanism. He suggested I was experiencing delusions brought on by physical illness and stress. Nobody believed me. Nobody understood. Everyone thought I was losing my mind as my body fell apart. I was released from the hospital after 2 weeks, deemed too unstable mentally to be hospitalized physically. My family discussed putting me in a psychiatric facility. My friends stopped calling. Everyone assumed I was experiencing a mental health crisis, that the scarecrow story was a delusion born from desperation and illness. I started researching the history of that area. I found references to a community that had existed in rural Oklahoma since the 1800s. A community called the Harvesters. According to scattered historical documents and old newspaper articles, the Harvesters were a secretive religious group that believed in something called spiritual cultivation. They believed that some people were meant to have their life force harvested and redistributed to the community. They believed scarecrows were vessels that could trap and hold the essence of specific individuals. The state investigated the community in 1962 after a series of mysterious deaths. But by the time authorities arrived, the community had dispersed. The scarecrows were left standing in the fields. According to one old article, investigators didn't understand the purpose of the scarecrows and dismissed them as merely unusual rural decoration. They tore some down, but not all. They left hundreds still standing in the fields. That is when I understood the horrifying truth. The scarecrows might not need the cult anymore. The scarecrows might be functioning independently, still trapping and harvesting the life force of people who broke down on that road. The scarecrows might be self-sustaining now, powered by over a century of accumulated spiritual energy and death. I created a website. I documented everything I learned about the scarecrows and the harvesters. I posted photographs of the scarecrows with personal items attached. I listed the names of people I identified as victims. I tried to warn people not to break down on that stretch of road, not to interact with anyone offering help, not to let anyone obtain their personal items. I don't know if anyone has listened to my warnings. I don't know if my website has prevented anyone from becoming a victim. I only know that I am still dying. I only know that my body is failing despite my efforts to destroy my scarecrow and sever the spiritual connection. The horrifying part is understanding how the scarecrows work. They don't drain your life force instantly. They harvest it slowly, methodically, like a farmer collecting crops throughout the season. They keep you alive long enough to ensure the harvesting is complete. Then your body simply gives up. Your organs fail. Your mind fades. You die from something no medical professional can diagnose because they don't understand that you've been spiritually murdered. I have maybe 3 weeks left. My organs are shutting down. My heart is arrhythmic. My kidneys are failing. My liver is compromised. My doctors have stopped suggesting treatments. They started talking about comfort care and palliative options. They started using the word when instead of if when discussing my death. But I am not afraid anymore. I've made peace with what is happening to me. They accepted that I am being harvested. That my essence is being drawn out of me by a scarecrow standing in an Oklahoma field. That my death will feed something I've done to fully understand. What I am afraid of is that other people will break down on that road. Other people will encounter the scarecrows. Other people will have their personal items incorporated into new scarecrows. Other people will slowly wither and die while everyone around them thinks they read crazy. The horrific harvest of the scarecrow cult is real. The scarecrows are still standing. The harvesting is still occurring. And I am evidence of it, living proof that something impossible and terrifying is happening in rural Oklahoma, something that defies medical explanation and logical understanding. I'm telling you this story because I need people to know. I need people to understand that scarecrows aren't just harmless decoration. I need people to know that if they break down on a rural road and someone obtains their personal items, they need to track down where those items go. They need to find their scarecrow. They need to destroy it completely before the harvesting begins. But more than that, I need people to understand that sometimes the most terrifying horror I ascend is something that jumps out at you in the darkness. Sometimes the most terrifying horror is something that slowly drains you from the inside out, something that turns your body into a resource to be harvested, something that kills you while everyone around you believes you, simply losing your mind. I am asking you now, if you were slowly dying from something nobody could diagnose or explain, and you told people the truth about what was happening, but nobody believed you, would you keep fighting to prove it? Or would you accept that you were the only person who knows the truth about your own death? Tell me in the comments. Tell me what you would do. Story 3. Soul Eater of the Silent Forest. I lost 3 days of my life in a place where sound goes to die, and I'm still not sure who I am anymore. That's the thing about losing pieces of yourself. You don't realize what is missing until you reach for a memory that should be there and find nothing but empty space. My wife, whose name took me 2 hours to remember yesterday. 2 hours of staring at the woman I'd loved for 15 years, seeing a stranger, his face, feeling nothing but a hollow ache where recognition should be. She cried. I couldn't remember why that shit upset me. My name is Michael Torres. I am 43 years old. I am a surveyor for a logging company based out of Olympia, Washington. Or at least I was. These are facts I had to write down and read every morning because the certainty of who I am keeps slipping away like water through my fingers. And it all started when I walked into a section of forest that shouldn't exist. The locals call it the Silent Forest, though you find that name on any map. It is a roughly circular patch of old-growth timber about 30 miles northeast of Mount Rainier. Maybe 200 acres of Douglas fir and western hemlock that somehow got missed by a century of logging. My company acquired the logging rights last September, and I was sent to survey the boundaries and assess the timber quality. The warning came from a waitress at a diner in the nearest town, a place called Ashford. I just stopped for breakfast before heading up the mountain, and when she heard where I was going, her face went pale. She told me to stay out of that particular section of forest. Said people who went in came out different, changed. Some didn't come out at all, and those who did eventually seek them out were found wandering in a daze, unable to remember their own names. I thanked her for the concern and ignored her completely. I heard every variation of forest superstition in my 20 years of surveying. Bigfoot, spirits, cursed ground. It was always the same. Small-town folklore designed to keep outsiders away from prime timber or favorite hunting grounds. I drove up the logging road that Tuesday morning in late September. The autumn air crisp and clean. The mountains beautiful in a way that still takes my breath away even after 2 decades in this profession. The road ended at the forest boundary, marked by a weathered sign that someone had spray-painted with a single word, "Turn back." I grabbed my gear and started hiking. The first thing I noticed was how normal it seemed. Dense canopy overhead, thick undergrowth, the usual sounds of a Pacific Northwest forest. Birds calling, squirrels rustling through the branches, the distant rush of a creek. But as I moved deeper, following my GPS toward the center of the tract, something changed. The sounds began to fade. Not gradually, like you expect as you move away from a highway or a stream, but abruptly, unnaturally, like someone was turning down the volume on the world. By the time I hiked a mile, the forest was completely silent. No birds, no insects, no wind through the trees. Even my footsteps seemed muffled, absorbed by the ground instead of echoing through the woods. I stopped and clapped my hands. The sound was flat, dead, like clapping in a soundproofed room. My breathing was the only noise, and even that seemed too quiet, too distant. The silence was oppressive, suffocating, the kind of absolute quiet that makes your ears ring and your heart pound too loud in your chest. I'd been in plenty of remote forests, experienced plenty of quiet moments, but this was different. This silence felt deliberate, hungry. I told myself it was an acoustic anomaly, something about the density of the trees or the geography creating a dead zone. I pulled out my satellite phone to call the office and let them know I'd arrived. The phone was dead, completely drained despite being fully charged that morning. My GPS was dead too. Even my digital camera wouldn't turn on. That is when the unease became genuine fear. I turned to head back the way I'd come, but something stopped me. A feeling, a compulsion, like invisible hands gently pushing me forward, deeper into the silent forest. My legs moved without my conscious decision, carrying me further from the boundary, further from safety. I tried to resist, tried to turn around, but my body wouldn't obey. It was like being a passenger in my own flesh, watching helplessly as something else piloted me deeper into that horrible silence. The trees began to look wrong, not diseased or damaged, just wrong. Their bark was too smooth, their branches arranged in patterns that made my eyes hurt. And between the trees, in the shadows that shouldn't have been so dark in the middle of the day, I started seeing movement. Shapes, human-sized but not quite human-shaped. They moved with a fluidity that was unsettling, like they existed slightly out of sync with normal time. I couldn't focus on them directly. Whenever I tried to look at one, it would slip to the edge of my vision. But I could feel them watching, could feel their attention like cold fingers on the back of my neck. My legs kept walking, my body kept moving forward. And slowly, insidiously, I began to forget things, small things at first, what I'd eaten for breakfast, the name of the diner, the waitress who warned me, then bigger things, the name of my company, where I lived, why I was in these woods at all. The memories didn't fade like normal forgetting. They were ripped away, surgically extracted, leaving holes in my consciousness that I could feel but couldn't fill. I walked for what felt like hours, though time had become meaningless in that place. The sun never seemed to move. The light never changed. Just that eternal, unchanging twilight beneath the canopy and that terrible, absolute silence. And the more I walked, the more of myself I lost. My wife's face became fuzzy. My children, his names slipped away. The memory of my first job, my first car, my childhood home. All of it extracted piece by something I couldn't see but could feel feeding on me. That is what the silent forest does. It doesn't kill you. Killing is too quick, too merciful. Instead, it consumes your consciousness, drains away everything that makes you you, leaving behind an empty shell that still breathes and walks but no longer knows why. I watched it happen to someone else. That is the truly horrifying part. I wasn't alone in those woods. I found him sitting at the base of a massive Douglas fir, staring at nothing with eyes that didn't blink. A man, maybe in his 60s, wearing hiking clothes that looked decades old. His face was slack, his hands rested in his lap. He was breathing, his chest rising and falling, but there was nothing behind his eyes. No recognition, no awareness, just an empty human shell, still alive but completely hollow. I tried to speak to him, tried to shake his shoulder, but I couldn't remember how to form words. Couldn't remember what speech was for. My own identity was dissolving so rapidly now that I couldn't hold on to thoughts for more than seconds before they evaporated. The shapes in the shadows grew closer, more distinct. I still couldn't see them clearly, but I could sense their satisfaction. Their feeding, they were ancient. These things, old beyond comprehension, and they learned that human consciousness was the most nourishing meal in existence. Not flesh, not blood, but the actual essence of self. The memories and experiences and emotions that make a person more than just biological machinery. I would have joined that empty man at the base of the tree. Would have sat down and let the silent forest finish consuming me. But something intervened, something I still don't understand. A sound, the first sound I'd heard in hours. A single clear note, like a bell or a chime, cutting through the suffocating silence. The shapes in the shadows recoiled. The compulsion forcing me forward released its grip, and suddenly I could run. I ran without direction, without plan, just blind panic driving me through the trees, stumbling over roots, crashing through undergrowth. And slowly, so slowly, sound began to return. A whisper of wind, the distant call of a bird, the crunch of my boots on the forest floor. I burst out of the silent forest 3 days after I entered. 3 days I don't remember. 3 days that exist only as a blank space in my life. I was found wandering along the highway by a state trooper, dehydrated and confused, unable to remember my name or where I come from. They identified me through my wallet, called my wife, brought me to the hospital where doctors ran every test imaginable and found nothing physically wrong. No injuries, no diseases, just a man with severe retrograde amnesia and a story that made no sense. Over the following weeks, some memories returned. Fragments, pieces of my life floating back like debris after a shipwreck, but huge sections are still missing. My wedding day, the birth of my children, my parents' faces, 20 years of surveying experience, gone, consumed by something that lives in a forest where sound goes to die. The logging company shelved the timber rights for that section, said the terrain was too difficult, the timber quality too poor. But I think they know. I think I'm not the first surveyor they sent in there. Not the first one to come back changed. I tried to warn others, contacted the Forest Service, the sheriff, this department, even posted online. But there is no evidence. The man I saw sitting at the base of that tree was never found. The satellite images show nothing unusual, and people who hike near that area report normal forest sounds, normal conditions. The silent forest only reveals itself to certain people, only opens that door for specific souls. And I have no idea why I was chosen, why I was allowed to escape when others weren't, why I lost only part of myself instead of everything. But here is what keeps me awake at night, what fills me with a terror that grows stronger every day. I can feel it calling me back. In quiet moments, when the world grows too still, I hear that silence, that hungry, waiting silence, and I feel the pull, the compulsion to return, to finish what was started, to let it consume the rest of me until there's nothing left but an empty shell sitting at the base of a tree, waiting for eternity. My wife says I'm different now, that I look at her like I'm trying to remember why I should care. My kids are frightened of me because I can recall the little rituals we used to share, the inside jokes, the bedtime stories. I am a stranger wearing their father's face, and they can sense it. Sometimes I look in the mirror in dawn to recognize the person staring back. Not because my appearance has changed, but because the connection between my reflection and my sense of self has been severed. I see features, eyes, nose, mouth, but they belong to someone I can quite remember being. The doctors say the memories might return completely. That trauma-induced amnesia often resolves with time. But I know better. The silent forest didn't traumatize me. It fed on me, and what it consumed ISN coming back because it's not hidden somewhere in my brain. It's gone, digested by an entity that exists to drain consciousness from living things. I just started writing everything down. Every memory I still have, every fact about my life, recorded in notebooks I keep with me at all times. Because the holes keep expanding, new memories disappearing, new pieces of myself vanishing into that void. Whatever the silent forest started, it's continuing. Even now, hundreds of miles away, it is still feeding on me. Still draining away my consciousness one fragment at a time. I drove back to Ashford last week, sat in that same diner. The waitress who warned me was gone. The new waitress said she disappeared 2 months ago, went hiking and never came back. Search teams found her 3 days later, sitting at the base of a tree in a section of forest where no sounds could be heard. She was breathing, heart beating, but there was nobody home behind her eyes. They say she's in a care facility now, a living body with no consciousness, fed through tubes, bathed by nurses, existing but not living. And I wonder if that is my future, if the silent forest will finish consuming me remotely, leaving my body intact but my consciousness completely devoured. I can feel it happening. Every day I am less. Every day more of me is missing. Soon there won't be enough left to know I'm disappearing. And maybe that is the real horror. Not the moment of becoming empty, but the slow awareness of your own erasure. So here, it's my question for you, and I need you to think carefully before you answer. If you could feel yourself disappearing piece by piece, your memories and personality being consumed by something beyond understanding, would you fight to hold on to whatever fragments remained? Or would you let go and accept the peace of emptiness? Write your answer in the comments, because I'm running out of time to decide. and I'm not sure I'll remember why it matters much longer. Story 4. Macabre Marionette of Murphy. The thing that terrifies me most is not what the marionette did to me. It is knowing that right now, somewhere in America, someone else has found it. Someone else is bringing it home, and they have no idea what is waiting for them in the darkness. I am writing this while I still can, while my hands are still my own, because I know the control I have right now is temporary. It always comes back, and when it does, I will not be myself anymore. My name is David Brennan. I am an estate sale buyer from Ohio. For 15 years, I have made my living purchasing items from deceased estates and reselling them online. Furniture, jewelry, old books, antiques. I have been inside hundreds of homes where people died. I have sorted through the possessions of the forgotten and the abandoned. I thought I had seen everything that death leaves behind. Then I found the marionette in Murphy, Pennsylvania. Murphy is not really a town anymore. Maybe 200 people live there now, most of them over 60. The main street is lined with empty storefronts. The gas station closed in 2003. The only business still operating is a combination post office and general store that smells like mildew and desperation. It is the kind of place where America is slowly dying, one boarded window at a time. The estate sale was for the Kowalski house, a 3-story Victorian on the edge of town that had been empty for 7 years. Margaret Kowalski had died alone at 89, and her only living relative wanted everything sold and the house demolished. The realtor who hired me said the place gave her the creeps. She said she would not go inside alone. She said something about the house felt wrong. I should have listened. I arrived on a gray Saturday morning in late September. The air was cold and smelled like rotting leaves. The Kowalski house loomed over the street, its paint peeling, its windows dark and empty like the eyes of a corpse. The front porch sagged in the middle. Dead vines covered the walls like veins. I stood there for a long moment, staring up at that terrible house, and I felt something I had not felt in years of doing this work. Fear, not the rational fear of a collapsing floor or bad wiring. This was something deeper, something primal. The house was watching me. I know how that sounds. I know how crazy it seems. But I swear to you, that building was aware of my presence. It was waiting for me to enter. It wanted me inside. The front door was unlocked. The realtor had left it open for me. I stepped into the entryway and the smell hit me immediately. Dust and decay and something else. Something sweet and rotten, like flowers left too long in a vase. The floorboards creaked under my weight. Every sound echoed through the empty rooms. I could hear my own breathing, loud and harsh in the silence. I started on the first floor. Old furniture, mostly worthless. Boxes of books and papers. Kitchen items from the 1950s. Nothing unusual, nothing valuable. But as I worked, I kept feeling like I was not alone. I would turn around, certain someone was standing behind me, only to find empty rooms. I would hear footsteps above me on the second floor, but when I climbed the stairs, there was no one there. The second floor was worse. The hallway stretched into darkness despite the windows. Doors hung open on bedrooms that looked like they had not been touched in decades. In one room, a bed sat against the wall, still made up with a faded quilt. Toys covered the floor, a rocking horse stood in the corner, and I swear I saw it moving slightly, even though there was no breeze. But it was the attic that changed everything. The attic stairs were hidden behind a door I almost missed. They were narrow and steep, climbing up into darkness. I had to use my flashlight. Each step groaned under my weight, and I had the horrible feeling that the stairs might collapse, that I might fall backward into darkness and break my neck, and no one would find me for days. The attic was massive. It stretched the entire length of the house, filled with shapes covered in white sheets. Dust hung in the air like fog. My flashlight beam cut through the gloom, making shadows dance and shift. And in the back corner, standing upright against the wall, was the marionette. It was life-sized, maybe 5 feet tall, a child, or something that looked like a child. It was dressed in clothes from another era, a little boy, a suit, complete with a cap and shoes. The face was porcelain, painted with incredible detail. Rosy cheeks, blue eyes, red lips curved in a slight smile. Strings hung from its limbs, tangled and knotted, trailing up into the rafters above. I stepped closer. The face was so realistic it made my skin crawl. The eyes seemed to follow me. The smile seemed to widen slightly. I reached out to touch it, and the moment my fingers made contact with the wood, I felt something. A shock, like static electricity, but deeper. It went through my hand and up my arm and into my chest. For just a second, I could not move. I was frozen, my hand on the marionette, his shoulder, and I felt something moving inside me. Rearranging, taking stock, learning. Then it was over. I pulled my hand back and stepped away, my heart pounding. The marionette had not moved. It just stood there, strings hanging limp, that terrible smile on its painted face. I should have left it there. God, I should have walked away. But this was my job. This was what I did. And despite the creeping horror I felt looking at that thing, I knew it was valuable. Antique marionettes, especially life-sized ones, could sell for thousands of dollars. This could be the score that made my whole trip worthwhile. I carried it down from the attic. It was heavier than it looked. The joints moved stiffly, the strings tangling around my arms. Getting it down the narrow stairs was difficult. More than once, I felt like it was resisting me, like it did not want to leave. But I managed to get it to my van and load it in the back. The drive home took 3 hours. The whole time, I kept glancing in the rearview mirror at the marionette lying in the back. Those painted eyes staring up at nothing. That smile never changing. Twice, I thought I saw it move. Just a twitch of the fingers, a slight turn of the head. But when I looked directly at it, it was perfectly still. I got home after dark. I live alone in a small house outside Columbus. No neighbors within shouting distance. I unloaded the marionette and brought it inside, setting it up in my spare bedroom where I store items before listing them online. I positioned it in the corner, entangling the strings as best I could. Then I stood back and looked at it. In the dim light of the spare room, it looked even more unsettling. The shadows made the face seem alive. The eyes gleamed. I could see every detail of the craftsmanship. The tiny lines around the mouth, the individual eyelashes, the delicate painting of the lips. I took photos for my online listing. I researched similar items. I estimated the value at around $5,000. Then I went to bed, feeling satisfied with my find, already planning how I would spend the money. That night, I had the most terrifying nightmare of my life. I dreamed I was in a dark room. I could not move. My arms and legs were stiff, frozen in place. I could feel strings attached to my wrists and ankles, pulling tight, cutting into my skin. I tried to scream, but my mouth would not open. I could only watch as a figure moved in the darkness, operating the strings, making me dance. I woke up gasping. My bedroom was ice cold. My sheets were soaked with sweat, and my arms and legs ached like I had been running for hours. I got out of bed and walked to the bathroom. My legs felt strange, stiff, like the joints were not bending quite right. I splashed water on my face and looked in the mirror. My reflection stared back at me with an expression I did not make. A slight smile, eyes too wide, head tilted at an odd angle. Then my reflection moved. And I did not. It was only for a second. Less than a second. But I saw it. My reflection raised its hand to the mirror while my real hand stayed at my side. Then everything snapped back to normal. I was in control again. It was just me in the mirror, pale and scared and very much awake. I went to the spare room. I had to see the marionette. I had to make sure it was still just a doll. Still just wood and paint and string. It was exactly where I had left it. Standing in the corner, motionless, but something was different. The head was turned slightly. I was sure I had positioned it facing forward. Now it was angled toward the door, toward where I was standing, and the smile looked wider. I told myself I was being paranoid. Told myself it was just the nightmare making me see things. But I could not shake the feeling that the marionette had moved while I slept. That it had walked through my house. That it had stood beside my bed and watched me dream. The next day, things got worse. I was making breakfast when my hand jerked. The coffee mug I was holding flew across the kitchen and shattered against the wall. I stared at my hand. I had not meant to throw it. I had not felt myself move. It was like my hand had acted on its own. An hour later, I was walking to my office when my leg buckled. I fell hard, my knee cracking against the floor. But it did not feel like a fall. It felt like something had pulled my leg out from under me. Like invisible strings had yanked me down. I started noticing other things. Small movements I did not control. My head turning to look at something when I was focused elsewhere. My fingers twitching and dancing when my hands were at rest. Once, while I was typing an email, my hand stopped mid-sentence and began moving across the keyboard in a pattern I did not recognize. Random letters, no words, just my fingers playing across the keys like someone was practicing. By evening, I was terrified. I knew, with absolute certainty, that the marionette was doing this. Somehow. That thing was connected to me. It was learning to control me. the same way someone would learn to control a puppet. I went to the spare room to destroy it. I was going to smash it to pieces, burn it, do whatever it took to break the connection. But when I opened the door, I could not move. My body froze, my legs locked in place, my arms hung at my sides. I could only stand there and watch as the marionette slowly turned its head to face me. The strings above it began to move, pulling taut, and I felt the corresponding pull in my own limbs. Then I started to move, not because I wanted to, because something was making me. I walked into the room. Stiff, jerky movements, like a puppet on strings. I stopped in front of the marionette. I could see my reflection in its glass eyes. I looked terrified. It looked pleased. My arm raised against my will. My hand reached out and touched the marionette's face. That same shock ran through me, stronger this time. And in that moment, I saw something. A memory, but not my memory. A little boy, maybe 8 years old, playing in a yard. This was decades ago. The colors were faded. The images grainy like old film. The boy was laughing, happy. Then the image shifted. The boy was in a dark room, scared, crying. Someone was building something. The marionette, creating it, putting something inside it, something that should not be there. The vision ended. I was back in my spare room, my hand still on the marionette, his face. And I understood. This was not just a doll. This was a prison. Something had been trapped inside it. Something that wanted out. And it had found a new body to inhabit. Mine. I tried to pull away, but I could not. My body would not obey. Instead, I watched in horror as my other hand reached up and began to untangle the strings from the marionette. Carefully, deliberately, like I had done this 1,000 times before. When the strings were free, they drifted through the air and wrapped around my wrists and ankles. I felt them tighten, felt them sink into my skin. And then I was released. I stumbled backward, gasping, and looked down at my hands. Thin red marks circled my wrists where the strings had been. And when I moved my fingers, I felt resistance. Like invisible strings were still there. Like something above me was learning to make me dance. That was 3 weeks ago. Since then, I have lost control more and more often. Sometimes for a few minutes. Sometimes for hours. I will be doing something normal, cooking or watching television or trying to work. And suddenly I'm frozen. My body moves without me. I walk through my house in jerky, puppet-like movements. My head turns at wrong angles. My arms gesture in ways that hurt. And the worst part is, I can still see. I am still aware. I am trapped inside my own body, watching it move, unable to stop it. Just like whoever is trapped inside the marionette was trapped for all those years. I researched the Kowalski house. I found old newspaper articles. In 1952, a child went missing in Murphy. An 8-year-old boy named Thomas Brennan. He was never found. The last place he was seen was near the Kowalski house. Margaret Kowalski was questioned but never charged. There was no evidence, no body, nothing. The marionette was made in 1952, the same year the boy disappeared. I know what happened now. I know what Margaret Kowalski did. She did something terrible, something evil, and she trapped that boy somewhere he could never escape. She made him into a puppet, and now he has been a prisoner for 70 years, and he wants out. He wants a real body again. He wants to be free, and he's taking mine. I am writing this during one of my brief moments of control. My hands are shaking. I can already feel the pull starting again, the tug on my wrists and ankles. Soon I will stop being me. Soon I will be the puppet, and whatever is in the marionette will be the puppeteer. I tried to destroy it. I tried to burn it, break it, bury it, but I cannot touch it anymore. Whenever I try, my body stops obeying. I become the marionette, and it becomes the master. I called the police. I tried to explain. They thought I was crazy, having a breakdown. They left after an hour of talking to me, promising to send someone to check on me later. But no one came. No one believes me. The marionette is still in the spare room. It has not moved from its corner. It does not need to. It has me now, and every day, I lose a little more. Every day, I am less myself and more something else. Last night, I woke up and found myself standing in the backyard. I do not remember walking there. I was just suddenly there, in the dark, in the cold, moving my arms in slow, sweeping motions like I was dancing, like I was performing. And above me, in the sky, I swear I could see them. The strings, invisible threads stretching up into the darkness, disappearing into nothing. I am losing this fight. I know that now. Soon, I will be gone completely. Soon, Thomas Brennan, or whatever he has become after 70 years trapped in wood and paint, will have full control. And I will be the one trapped. I will be the prisoner, locked inside my own head, unable to move or speak or do anything but watch. But here's what terrifies me more than anything else. After I am gone, after he has my body completely, what will he do? Will he be satisfied, or will he keep the marionette? Will he set it up somewhere new, somewhere it can be found by someone else? Will the cycle continue? Another person trapped, another puppet dancing on invisible strings. I think about the estate sale. I think about how easy it was to find, how the realtor practically begged me to come clear out the house, how the marionette was positioned in that attic, waiting, like it wanted to be found, like this was all part of the plan. Right now, my hands are starting to move on their own, typing words I am not thinking. My head is turning toward the spare room, toward where it waits. I can feel the pull getting stronger, the strings getting tighter. This is probably the last time I will be able to write, the last time I will be myself. So I am leaving this as a warning. If you ever see a life-sized marionette at an estate sale, in an antique shop, in someone's attic, do not touch it. Do not bring it home. Do not think you can control it or sell it or destroy it. Because the marionette does not need strings to make you dance. It just needs you to want it, to take it, to bring it into your life. And once you do, the strings are already there. You just cannot see them yet. I can see mine now. They are glowing in the dark, beautiful and terrible, and they are pulling me toward the spare room, toward my new home, toward the corner where I will stand and smile and wait for the next person to find me, the next body, the next dance. My name was David Brennan. I was real. I was alive. I was human. Now I am something else. And the marionette stands empty in the corner, waiting for you. Story 5. Sinister Scrawlings of Spruce Knob. I woke up at 3 in the morning with a pen in my hand and blood under my fingernails, writing equations I did not understand on the wall of a fire tower I should never have entered. That is when I knew something terrifying had happened to me on Spruce Knob, something that still haunts me every single night. My name is Marcus, and I am a wilderness photographer from Virginia. I have spent 15 years traveling through America, its most isolated places, chasing shots of abandoned structures for my portfolio. Fire towers have always fascinated me. They stand alone on mountaintops, silent witnesses to decades of solitude and darkness. When I heard about the old tower on Spruce Knob in West Virginia, the highest point in the state, I knew I had to photograph it. What I found there was not history. It was horror. The drive took me 6 hours through winding mountain roads that grew narrower with each passing mile. October had turned the forests into walls of red and gold, but as I climbed higher, the colors faded into gray. The air grew colder. The trees became skeletal. By the time I reached the trailhead, the sky had turned the color of old bruises, and a wind had picked up that sounded like breathing through broken teeth. The hike to the tower took 90 minutes. The trail was overgrown and barely visible, marked only by faded blazes on trees that looked diseased. I passed no one. I heard no birds. The only sound was my boots on wet leaves and that constant wind, growing stronger as I climbed. My camera bag felt heavier with each step, and I kept stopping to catch my breath, feeling like something was watching me from the dense woods on either side of the path. When I finally reached the clearing at the summit, I saw the tower. It rose 60 feet into the darkening sky, a skeletal structure of steel beams and wooden stairs that spiraled upward to a small cabin at the top. But what stopped me cold, what made my skin crawl with instant dread, was what covered every single surface of that tower. Writings, thousands upon thousands of writings. Every beam, every step, every railing was covered in tight, cramped handwriting. Numbers, equations, symbols I had never seen before, star charts, geometric patterns, mathematical formulas that stretched across entire sections of steel. The writing was in different colors, black marker, white paint, red spray paint, and some that looked like it had been scratched directly into the metal with something sharp. The sheer volume was overwhelming, disturbing, impossible to process. I stood there in the fading light, my breath forming clouds in the cold air, staring at this creepy monument to madness. Every instinct told me to leave, to hike back down before darkness fell completely. But I am a photographer. I chase the eerie and the abandoned. This was exactly what I had come for, even if it terrified me. I started photographing the writings as the sun disappeared behind the mountains. The equations meant nothing to me, but they were incredibly complex. Calculus, maybe, physics, astronomy, star charts showing constellations I did not recognize, dates going back decades, and woven throughout, phrases in English that made my blood run cold. They speak through numbers. The stars are counting down. Listen to the frequency. West Virginia will burn first. I took hundreds of photos as the darkness closed in around me. The wind had become a howl now, shaking the entire tower structure. My hands were numb with cold. I knew I should leave, but something kept me there. Some horrible fascination with these sinister scrawlings. This monument to someone, this descent into nightmare. That is when I found the cabin door at the top still had a working latch. The inside of the fire tower cabin was worse than the outside. Much worse. Every single inch of every wall, the ceiling, the floor, the windows, was covered in the same obsessive writing. Layers upon layers of it. Equations stacked on equations. Star charts drawn over other star charts. The windows were so covered in markings I could barely see outside. A sleeping bag lay in one corner, surrounded by empty food cans and dozens of dead pens and markers. Whoever had done this had lived here. Had spent weeks or months alone on this mountaintop, writing their madness into reality. I should have left then. I should have run down that mountain in the darkness and never looked back. But night had fallen completely, and the trail was too dangerous to navigate without light. My flashlight batteries were dying. And despite the horror of that place, it was shelter from the wind that now screamed across the exposed summit with a sound like something dying. I told myself I would stay just until dawn. Just a few hours. I would not sleep. I would sit by the door and wait for first light, then hike down as fast as I could. It seemed reasonable. It seemed safe enough. I cannot tell you when I fell asleep. I remember sitting with my back against the door, camera in my lap, listening to the wind shake the cabin. I remember the darkness pressing against those marked windows. I remember feeling a strange vibration through the floor, a rhythmic pulse like a heartbeat deep in the mountain. And then nothing. When I woke, it was 3 a.m. according to my watch. I was standing in the center of the cabin with a black marker in my right hand. My left hand was pressed against the wall, and I had been writing. The terror that flooded through me was unlike anything I had ever experienced. My hand ached, my fingers were cramped around the marker, and the wall in front of me was covered in fresh equations, symbols, star charts that I did not remember creating. The writing was mine. I recognized my own handwriting, but I had no memory of doing it. None at all. I dropped the marker like it was burning me and staggered backward. That is when I noticed my fingernails. They were broken and bleeding, packed with paint and metal shavings. I had been clawing at the walls, scratching into the metal supports, writing with my own blood when the marker ran dry. My camera bag was open on the floor. My phone was dead. And every surface within my reach was covered in new writings that I had created while unconscious, while possessed by whatever haunted presence lived in that tower. I grabbed my flashlight and shined it on the nearest equation I had written. I am not a mathematician. I barely passed algebra in high school, but I had written complex calculus, physics formulas, astronomical calculations that would have taken a professor hours to compose. And woven throughout were dates, future dates, dates in November and December with locations next to them. Parkersburg, November 12th. Charleston, November 28th. Wheeling, December 3rd. I was shaking so badly I could barely hold the flashlight steady. The cabin felt smaller, closing in. The darkness outside the marked windows felt alive, watching, waiting. That pulse from deep in the mountain was stronger now, faster, like something accelerating toward a terrible climax. I did not pack my gear. I did not take photographs. I grabbed only my keys and ran. I half fell down those spiral stairs, my flashlight beam bouncing wildly across all those sinister scrawlings. The writing seemed to glow in the darkness, pulsing with that same rhythm I had felt through the cabin floor. I heard myself making sounds, crying or screaming or both, as I stumbled down that overgrown trail in the middle of the night. I do not remember the drive home. I remember reaching my truck. I remember my hands shaking so badly I could barely get the key in the ignition. I remember driving too fast on those winding mountain roads, checking my rearview mirror constantly for something following me, though I did not know what. I made it home by dawn. I showered for an hour, scrubbing the paint and blood from under my fingernails. I threw away my clothes. I tried to forget. I told myself it was nothing. A stress reaction, sleepwalking, some kind of chemical in the old tower, carbon monoxide maybe, causing hallucinations. But I could not forget the dates I had written. November 12th, November 28th, December 3rd. On November 12th, a chemical plant exploded in Parkersburg, West Virginia. 11 people died. The news said it was a maintenance error, But I knew better. I had written that date. I had predicted it while unconscious in that tower. On November 28th, a bridge collapsed outside Charleston during morning traffic. 6 vehicles went into the river, 13 dead. The news blamed old infrastructure. But I had written it on that cabin wall while something else controlled my hand. I am writing this now because it is December 2nd, and tomorrow is December 3rd, and I wrote Wheeling next to that date. I have called the police. I have sent emails to news stations. No one believes me. How could they? I sound insane. I sound exactly like whoever covered that tower in writings. Whoever spent months alone on that mountaintop, receiving transmissions from something we are not supposed to understand. But here's the most terrifying part, the part that has me sitting here at 2 in the morning too scared to sleep. I can still feel it, that pulse, that frequency. It is in my head now, a rhythm that never stops, counting down to something horrible. And every time I close my eyes, I see more equations, more dates, more tragedies waiting to happen. Last night I woke up writing on my bedroom wall with a pencil I do not own. More dates, more locations. January, February, March. The tragedies are accelerating. Whatever lives on Spruce Knob, whatever speaks through those sinister scrawlings. It has been predicting disasters for decades. And now it has chosen me as its next instrument. I drove back to the tower 3 days ago. I had to see it again, had to understand. The writings had changed. New dates, new locations, new disasters that have not happened yet. And at the very top of the tower, written in letters 6 feet tall in red paint that looked fresh, were 4 words that made me run back to my truck and drive away forever. Thank you for listening. The tower was not a monument to madness. It was an antenna, a receiver, and whoever spent months up there before me, whoever covered every surface and equations and star charts and predictions, they had been listening to something broadcasting from beyond our understanding. Something that uses mathematics as a language. Something that can predict human tragedy because it causes human tragedy. I am infected now, contaminated. Whatever frequency that tower receives, I receive it too. Every night I wake up writing. Every morning I find new predictions on my walls, my notebooks, my skin. I have stopped going to work. I have stopped answering my phone. I sit here day after day, watching the news, waiting for my predictions to come true, knowing they will because they always do. Tomorrow is December 3rd. Something will happen in Wheeling. Something terrible. And I will have written it before it occurred, just like I wrote Parkersburg and Charleston. Just like I am writing future dates even now without realizing it. This is my warning. Stay away from Spruce Knob. Stay away from that tower. Do not read the writings. Do not spend the night. Do not listen to the pulse in the mountain. Because once you hear it, once you truly hear it, you cannot unhear it. It gets inside you. It makes you part of its terrible network of prediction and disaster. I can feel it now, even as I type this. That rhythm, that frequency. My right hand is cramping. I am reaching for a pen without meaning to. New equations are forming in my mind. Complex and terrible and true. I know what comes after Wheeling. I have already written it, though I have not looked at the words yet. I am too terrified to read my own predictions, because the final date I wrote was in March. My hometown, my street, my address, whatever broadcasts from that mountain, whatever alien or ancient intelligence uses abandoned fire towers as listening posts. It has marked me. And it has marked the place I love. And all I can do is write its messages and watch as they come true. One horrible prediction after another, until the final date arrives and I understand why the previous writer left the tower. They did not leave because they went mad. They left because their time as an antenna was finished. Because the signal had moved on to someone new. Because the tower on Spruce Knob is always listening, always receiving, always waiting for the next person stupid enough to spend a night surrounded by those sinister scrawlings. I am writing on my walls again right now. I can feel the marker in my hand even though I am typing. I can hear myself speaking equations aloud even though my mouth is closed. The frequency has become my heartbeat, my breathing, my entire existence. 3 more hours until December 3rd, until Wheeling, until my prediction proves true once again, and then I will be 1 day closer to March. Story 6. Nightmare in number 9 tunnel. I have seen my own death 9 times. And the worst part is knowing there is nothing I can do to stop it. My name is Jake Harmon, and I am a freight train conductor for Norfolk Southern Railway. I have been riding the rails across America for 17 years. I have seen every kind of landscape this country has to offer. Mountains and plains and cities and wilderness. I have traveled through hundreds of tunnels, some of them over a century old, carved through solid rock by men who died doing the work. But there's only one tunnel that I will never enter again. Only one tunnel that showed me things no human being should ever see. They call it number 9 tunnel, and it sits in the mountains of West Virginia, about 40 miles outside of a town called Grafton. And if you ever find yourself near it, if you ever consider walking through that darkness, I am begging you to turn around. Because what waits inside that tunnel is not death. It is something worse. It is the knowledge of death, the certainty of it, the nightmare of watching yourself die over and over until your mind shatters. Let me tell you what happened to me last October. Let me tell you about the 9 minutes that destroyed my life. The trouble started when my truck broke down on Route 50. I was off duty, heading home after a 3-day run, when the engine just died. No warning, no sputtering, just a sudden loss of power and then silence. I coasted to the shoulder and sat there in the growing darkness, trying to restart it. Nothing. The battery was fine. The lights worked, but the engine would not turn over. My phone had no signal. I was in the mountains, surrounded by thick forest, and the sun was setting fast. The nearest town was probably 10 miles back. I could see a few houses in the distance, dim lights through the trees, but they were too far to walk to before full dark. I was stuck. Then I remembered number 9 tunnel. It was about a mile up the road. I knew that much. And on the other side of the tunnel was an old maintenance station that might still have a working phone. It was a gamble, but it seemed better than sitting in my truck all night in the cold. I grabbed my flashlight and started walking. The air was freezing and smelled like pine and rotting leaves. The road was empty. No cars passed, no sound except my footsteps and the wind moving through the trees. Above me, the sky was turning that deep purple color that comes right before night truly falls. I walked fast, my breath coming out in white clouds, my hands shoved deep in my jacket pockets. The entrance to number 9 tunnel appeared suddenly, a black mouth carved into the mountainside. I stopped at the edge and shined my flashlight inside. The beam disappeared into darkness. I could not see the other end. The tunnel was long, maybe half a mile, and it curved slightly so that no light from either entrance could reach the middle. Just solid, absolute darkness. I had been through this tunnel dozens of times on the train, but I had never walked through it. Something about standing at the entrance, looking into that black void, made my skin crawl. It felt wrong, like the tunnel was not just empty darkness, like it was something alive, something waiting. I told myself I was being stupid. It was just a tunnel, just rock and steel and empty air. I had walked through plenty of tunnels before. This was no different. I clicked on my flashlight, took a deep breath, and stepped inside. The temperature dropped immediately. The cold was sharp and biting, like stepping into a freezer. My footsteps echoed off the curved walls, bouncing back at me from the darkness ahead. Water dripped somewhere in the distance. The sound was steady and rhythmic, like a heartbeat. Drip, drip, drip. I had been walking for maybe 30 seconds when I heard the first whisper. It was so faint I almost missed it. Just a breath of sound, like someone exhaling a word. I stopped and listened. The dripping continued. The wind at the tunnel entrance made a low moaning sound. But there was nothing else. No whisper, no voice. I told myself it was just the acoustics playing tricks on me. Tunnels do strange things to sound. I kept walking. My flashlight beam cut through the darkness, illuminating rough stone walls covered in moisture and moss. Railroad ties stretched ahead of me, disappearing into the black. And then I saw the first marking on the wall. It was carved into the stone, crude and deep. A number, the number 1. Just a simple vertical line, about a foot tall, gouged into the rock. I stopped and examined it. The edges of the carving looked old, worn, like it had been there for a very long time. I moved forward and found another marking. The number 2, then 3, then 4. Someone had carved numbers into the tunnel wall, one after another, counting up. I followed them deeper into the darkness. 5, 6, 7, 8, and then I reached the number 9. This marking was different. It was larger, deeper, carved with more force. And beneath it, in smaller letters, were words. I had to get close to read them in my flashlight beam. 9 minutes, 9 deaths, 9 chances to turn back. My heart started pounding. The words made no sense, but they filled me with a sudden, overwhelming dread. I should have turned around right then. I should have run back to my truck and waited for morning. But I did not. I was already halfway through the tunnel. The other side was closer than the entrance. It seemed stupid to go back when I was so close to getting through. I kept walking, and that is when everything changed. The darkness ahead of me shifted. It grew thicker, heavier, like it was becoming solid. My flashlight beam barely penetrated it. And then I heard a sound that made my blood turn to ice. A train whistle, long and mournful, echoing through the tunnel. But there was no train. I would have heard it coming. I would have felt the vibration in the tracks. There was nothing, just that terrible whistle, growing louder, coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. And then I saw it, a light in the distance, bright and white and moving fast, coming straight toward me. A train, a ghost train, barreling through the darkness. And I was standing directly in its path. I pressed myself against the tunnel wall and squeezed my eyes shut, waiting for the impact. The sound was deafening, the whistle screaming, the roar of the engine, the clatter of wheels on rails. It was going to hit me. It was going to crush me. I was going to die in this tunnel, but the train never came. The sound rushed past me, surrounding me, and then faded into silence. I opened my eyes. The tunnel was empty. No train, no light, just darkness and the steady dripping of water. And then the vision started. I was no longer standing in the tunnel. I was somewhere else, somewhere bright and familiar. I was in my kitchen, my house. It was daytime. Sunlight streamed through the windows. Everything looked normal, real. I could feel the tile floor under my feet, smell coffee brewing, hear birds singing outside. Then I looked down and saw the knife in my hand, a kitchen knife. The blade was clean and sharp and catching the light, and I was raising it toward my own throat. I tried to stop, tried to fight it, but my hand would not obey. It kept moving, bringing the blade closer to my neck, and I could feel the terror building, the absolute certainty that I was about to kill myself and there was nothing I could do to prevent it. The blade touched my skin. I felt the cold steel, felt the pressure, and then I drew it across my throat in one quick motion. The pain was instant and horrifying. Blood poured from the wound, hot and thick, soaking my shirt. I tried to scream but only managed a wet gurgling sound. I fell to my knees. The kitchen tilted and spun. Darkness crept in from the edges of my vision. And then I died, but I did not stay dead. The moment my vision went black, I was back in the tunnel, standing exactly where I had been before. My hand went to my throat. No wound, no blood, nothing. It had been a vision. A nightmare, but it had felt completely real. The pain, the fear, the death, all of it real. I checked my watch, my hand shaking so badly I could barely read the numbers. 1 minute had passed since I reached the number 9 carving. Just 1 minute, and then the second vision hit me. This time I was driving my truck on a dark highway, rain pounding on the windshield. I could feel the steering wheel under my hands, the vibration of the engine, the wipers beating back and forth. Everything real, everything solid. Then I saw the other car. It was in my lane, coming straight at me, headlights blinding. I tried to swerve, but there was no time. The impact was massive. Metal shrieking, glass exploding, the truck crumpling around me like paper. I felt my ribs break, felt my head slam forward, felt the steering wheel crush my chest. And then I died again. Slowly this time, bleeding out in the wreckage, unable to move, unable to breathe, just suffering and fading and dying while rain poured through the shattered windshield and soaked me in cold water. Then I was back in the tunnel. 2 minutes had passed, 7 more to go. The third death was a heart attack. Sudden and brutal. I was at work, walking along the side of a stopped train, and then my chest exploded in pain. I collapsed between the cars, gasping, clawing at my shirt, feeling my heart stutter and stop. I died alone on the gravel, staring up at the undercarriage of a freight car, tasting blood in my mouth. The fourth death was a fall. I was on a ladder, cleaning gutters at my house. And then I was tumbling backward, the world spinning, and I hit the concrete driveway headfirst. The crack was loud and final. Everything went dark instantly. The fifth death was drowning. I was in a lake, swimming, and then I was underwater, tangled in weeds, my lungs burning, water rushing into my mouth and nose. I fought and struggled and slowly suffocated in the cold, dark water while sunlight filtered down from above, just out of reach. The sixth death was a fire. I woke up in my bedroom to find the house burning around me. Smoke filled the air. Flames blocked the door. I tried to escape through the window, but the heat was too intense. My skin blistered, my lungs filled with smoke. I burned alive, screaming, feeling every second of agony. The seventh death was a shooting. I was in a convenience store, buying coffee, when a robbery went wrong. The gunshot was so loud it deafened me. The bullet entered my stomach. I fell to the floor and bled out slowly over the course of minutes, watching my life drain away onto the dirty linoleum while the robbers stepped over me and ran. The eighth death was a stroke. I was sitting in my living room, watching television, when my vision went strange. Half my face went numb. My arms stopped working. I tried to call for help, but my words came out garbled and wrong. I collapsed off the couch and lay there on the floor, paralyzed, my brain shutting down piece by piece until there was nothing left. And then came the ninth death, the worst death, the one that showed me the truth. I was back in the tunnel, number 9 tunnel, walking through the darkness. And I knew, with absolute certainty, that I would die here, that this tunnel would be my grave. I saw myself collapse in the middle of the darkness, saw my flashlight roll away across the railroad ties, saw myself lying there alone, my heart giving out, my breath stopping, dying in the cold and the black while water dripped somewhere in the distance. And the vision showed me when. It showed me the exact moment. 3 years from now, November 15th, I would enter this tunnel one more time, and I would never leave. The ninth vision ended. I was standing in the darkness, gasping, tears streaming down my face. 9 minutes had passed. I checked my watch with shaking hands and confirmed it. Exactly 9 minutes from the moment I reached the number 9 carving to the moment the last vision released me. 9 minutes of condensed horror. 9 deaths. 9 different ways my life would end. And the certainty, the absolute knowledge, that one of them was real. One of them would come true. But I did not know which one. I ran. I sprinted through the remaining darkness, my flashlight beam bouncing wildly, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I burst out of the far end of the tunnel into the cold night air and collapsed on the ground, sobbing. The stars above looked strange and distant. The world felt unreal. Everything I had just experienced was already starting to fade, becoming dreamlike and uncertain. But the fear remained. The knowledge remained. I had seen my deaths, all of them, and I would never be able to forget. I found the maintenance station. The phone worked. I called for help. A tow truck came. I got my truck fixed. I went home, and I have tried to live my life normally ever since. But I cannot. The visions haunt me. Every time I drive, I see that car coming at me in the rain. Every time I climb a ladder, I feel myself falling. Every time I swim, I taste the drowning. Every time I sleep, I wake up terrified that the house is burning. I researched number 9 tunnel. I found the history. During construction in 1893, 9 workers died. A cave-in trapped them deep inside the mountain. They suffocated slowly over the course of 9 hours while rescue teams tried desperately to reach them. Their bodies were never recovered. The tunnel was completed by building over their grave. They are still in there, entombed in the rock, and something about their deaths created something. A psychic trap, a nightmare machine. Anyone who walks through that tunnel experiences the same thing I did. 9 minutes, 9 deaths, 9 visions of how they will die. Most people who enter never make it through. They go mad in the darkness. They collapse. They have to be carried out by rescue teams, babbling and incoherent. Some kill themselves within days, unable to live with the knowledge of their own deaths. Others simply disappear. Maybe they return to the tunnel, drawn back by some terrible compulsion. Maybe they die exactly as the visions showed them. I do not know what will happen to me. I do not know which death is waiting. Maybe all of them are false. Maybe none of them will come true. But I do not believe that. The visions felt too real, too certain. And the 9th one, the one that showed me dying in the tunnel 3 years from now, that one haunts me more than all the others combined. Because I know, somehow, that I will go back. That something will call me back to number 9 tunnel. That I will walk into that darkness again, and this time I will not walk out. The railway still uses that tunnel. Trains pass through it every day, but no one walks through it anymore. The local authorities have sealed both ends with fences and warning signs. But the fences are easy to climb. The warnings are easy to ignore. And people still go in. Curious people, thrill seekers, people who do not believe the stories. They all come out changed. If they come out at all, I am writing this as a warning, as a confession, as a desperate attempt to make sense of what happened to me. If you ever find yourself near number 9 tunnel, if you ever see those carved numbers on the wall, turn around. Run. Do not let curiosity pull you deeper. Do not think you can handle it. Do not believe you are strong enough. Because the tunnel does not care how strong you are. It does not care what you believe. It only cares about showing you the truth, the horrible, inescapable truth of your own mortality. And once you have seen it, once you have lived through those 9 minutes of condensed nightmare, you will never be free. I have 2 years and 8 months left. 2 years and 8 months until November 15th. Until the 9th vision comes true. I have thought about running, moving far away, never going near West Virginia again. But I know it will not matter. Somehow, some way, I will end up in that tunnel. The vision showed me, and the visions do not lie. Every night, I dream about the darkness, about the dripping water and the carved numbers and the 9 deaths waiting for me. And every morning, I wake up and count the days. Counting down, just like the tunnel counted for me. 9 minutes, 9 deaths, 9 chances I ignored to turn back. And now there are no chances left. Only the waiting, only the certainty, only the knowledge that somewhere in the mountains of West Virginia, number 9 tunnel sits in the darkness, patient and hungry, and it is waiting for me to come home. Story 7. Ghastly groaning of Grandfather Mountain. I heard the mountain scream 3 nights ago, and I have not stopped crying since. That is not an exaggeration. That is not me being dramatic. I am a 42-year-old construction foreman from Asheville, North Carolina. And for 3 days straight, tears have been running down my face without stopping, and I do not know why. All I know is that something terrifying happened on Grandfather Mountain. Something that has broken something fundamental inside me. And I need to tell someone before it gets worse. My name is Derek Palmer, and I have lived in Western North Carolina my entire life. I know these mountains. I have hiked every trail, climbed every peak, camped in every valley. Grandfather Mountain has always been special to me. That massive formation rising over 5,000 feet, with its distinctive profile that looks like an old man lying on his back. Tourists love it. Locals respect it. I have been going there since I was a kid, and it has always felt like home. But 3 months ago, something changed. I started hearing stories, whispers from other hikers, from park rangers, from people who work at the nature center. They talked about sounds coming from the mountain at night. Not wind, not animals, something else. A groaning, a deep, resonant sound like the earth itself was in pain. Most people dismissed it as wind moving through the rocky formations, the kind of eerie atmospheric effect that mountains are known for. But the people who actually heard it, their faces changed when they described it. They looked haunted, disturbed, like they had experienced something that terrified them on a level they could not explain. I am not someone who believes in supernatural things. I work with concrete and steel. I deal in measurements and load-bearing calculations, but I am also not someone who ignores patterns. And the pattern I noticed was this: every single person who claimed to hear the groaning, every single one, developed the same symptom within days. Profound sadness. Deep, inexplicable sorrow that would not go away. Some of them were still dealing with it months later, taking antidepressants, seeing therapists, unable to shake the crushing weight of grief that had settled over them after their night on the mountain. I told myself it was mass hysteria. Suggestion. People hearing what they expected to hear and then convincing themselves something was wrong. I am a skeptic. I need proof. So 2 weeks ago, I decided to prove them all wrong. I would spend a night on Grandfather Mountain, preferably on a calm night with no wind, and I would record everything. I would show that there was no creepy groaning, no haunted mountain, no mysterious horror afflicting people with sadness. Just wind and rocks and imagination. I wish to God I had never gone. I chose October 23rd because the weather forecast showed perfect conditions. Clear skies, no wind, temperature in the low 40s. A full moon, ideal for hiking and camping. I packed my gear, my recording equipment, extra batteries, warm clothes, and enough supplies for 2 nights if I decided to stay longer. I told my girlfriend Sarah where I was going. She asked me not to go. She had heard the stories too, and something about them frightened her in a way I had never seen before. But I laughed it off. I kissed her goodbye and promised to call when I got back. That was the last normal conversation I had before everything changed. I reached the summit of Grandfather Mountain around 6 in the evening. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and red that made the entire landscape look like it was on fire. The famous mile-high swinging bridge was closed for the season, but I had a permit for backcountry camping. I set up my tent near Callaway Peak, the highest point, in a small clearing surrounded by ancient, gnarled trees that looked like they had been growing there for centuries. The silence hit me first. As the sun disappeared and darkness spread across the mountains, I realized I could not hear anything. No wind, no birds, no insects, no distant traffic, nothing, just absolute, suffocating silence that pressed against my ears like physical pressure. I have camped alone dozens of times, but I have never experienced quiet like that. It felt wrong, unnatural, like the mountain was holding its breath, waiting for something. I set up my recording equipment around 8 o'clock. I had 3 digital recorders positioned at different points around my campsite, all set to high sensitivity. I had my phone recording as well. I made dinner on my camp stove, the sound of the gas flame obscenely loud in that eerie silence, and settled in to wait. For 2 hours, nothing happened. I sat in my camp chair, wrapped in my sleeping bag, watching the moon rise over the distant peaks. It was beautiful, peaceful. I started to feel foolish for believing the stories, for wasting a perfectly good camping night trying to catch sounds that did not exist. I even laughed at myself, imagining how I would tell Sarah that I had spent the whole night listening to nothing. Then, at exactly 10:37 according to my watch, the mountain groaned. I felt it before I heard it, a vibration that started deep underground, rising up through the rock beneath my feet, traveling through my bones and into my chest. Then the sound came, a low, resonant groan that seemed to emanate from everywhere at once. It was not wind. It was not geological settling. It was organic, alive. It sounded like something massive and ancient was crying out in horrible, unending agony. The sound lasted maybe 15 seconds, but those 15 seconds changed everything. My hands started shaking, my chest tightened, and I felt something I had never experienced before. Instant, overwhelming sadness. Not fear, not panic, just crushing, suffocating grief that hit me like a physical blow and drove me to my knees. Tears started running down my face before I even understood what was happening. I was sobbing, gasping for air, my entire body racked with sorrow so profound I thought I might die from it. And I did not know why. There was no reason, no trigger, no memory or thought, just pure, distilled sadness pouring into me from that terrifying sound. The groaning stopped. The silence returned, somehow even more oppressive than before. I knelt there in the dirt, crying uncontrollably, my recording equipment forgotten, my rational mind completely overwhelmed by emotion I could not explain or control. It took me 20 minutes to pull myself together enough to stand. My face was soaked with tears. My throat hurt from sobbing. My chest felt hollow, scooped out, like something essential had been removed and replaced with emptiness. I checked my recorders with shaking hands. All three had captured the sound. It was real, documented, proof that I was not hallucinating or imagining things. But I did not feel vindicated. I felt horrified, because that sound was not natural. And whatever it was doing to me, whatever effect it was having on my mind and emotions, was still happening. The sadness had not faded. If anything, it was getting stronger, settling over me like a wet blanket, suffocating and inescapable. I decided to leave, pack up and hike down immediately, even in the dark. But before I could start breaking down my tent, the mountain groaned again. This time it was louder, longer. The vibration was so strong it knocked my camp stove over. The sound was deeper, more resonant, and layered with harmonics that should not exist in nature. It sounded like 1,000 voices crying out together, like the earth itself was screaming in pain that had lasted for eons and would never end. And the sadness intensified. I collapsed completely, curling into a ball on the ground, sobbing so hard I could not breathe. Images flooded my mind. Not my memories, someone else's, something else. I saw ages passing, continents shifting, ice advancing and retreating, forests growing and dying, and through it all, endless, unrelenting loneliness, isolation, the horror of being aware and alive and trapped in stone for millions of years with no way to move, no way to speak, no way to die. The mountain was alive. That was the terrifying truth that crashed into my consciousness as I lay there weeping. Grandfather Mountain was not just a geological formation. It was a living thing, something ancient beyond comprehension, something that had been conscious and aware since before humans existed, trapped in rock and soil, unable to move or communicate except through that ghastly groaning that leaked from it on still nights when no wind could mask its agony. The sound stopped again. I do not know how long I lay there, minutes or hours. Time had lost meaning. When I finally sat up, my face was numb from the cold and wet with tears that would not stop flowing. I tried to stand, but my legs would not support me. The sadness was crushing me, breaking me, turning me into something hollowed out and empty. That is when I noticed the trees around my campsite had changed. They were leaning inward, bending toward me, their branches reaching like grasping fingers. The moonlight cast shadows that looked like faces, twisted and agonized, screaming silently. And I realized with mounting horror that it was not just the mountain. The entire landscape was alive. The trees, the rocks, the soil beneath my feet. All of it aware, all of it in pain, all of it groaning in frequencies we are not meant to hear. I forced myself to my feet. I had to get off that mountain. Had to get away before the next groaning, before whatever was happening to me became permanent. I left everything behind. My tent, my sleeping bag, my expensive recording equipment. I just grabbed my phone and started stumbling down the trail in the moonlight, tears streaming down my face, that crushing sadness making every step feel like I was dragging an impossible weight. The hike down took 3 hours. 3 hours of stumbling through darkness, crying the entire time, feeling that terrible awareness pressing against my mind. 3 hours of knowing, with absolute certainty, that the mountains around me were alive and suffering and there was nothing I could do to help them. Nothing anyone could do. They had been trapped in agony for geological ages and would remain trapped until the earth itself died. I reached my truck at 2 a.m. and drove straight home. I did not call Sarah. I could not speak. I just drove through the night, tears pouring down my face, my chest tight with sorrow that felt like it would crush me from the inside out. When I got home, Sarah took one look at me and knew something was terribly wrong. I tried to tell her. I tried to explain what I had heard, what I had felt, what I now knew. But the words would not come. Every time I tried to speak about it, the sadness intensified until I could not breathe. That was 3 days ago. I have not stopped crying since. I have tried medication. I have seen doctors. They run tests and find nothing physically wrong. My brain scans are normal. My blood work is fine. But I cannot stop the tears or shake the crushing weight of sadness that settled over me on that mountain. The worst part is not the crying or the grief. The worst part is knowing, understanding something fundamental about our world that I was never meant to understand. The mountains are alive. The earth is conscious. And it has been suffering in silent agony for longer than human civilization has existed. Every mountain range, every geological formation, trapped and aware and in pain. I went back yesterday. I had to know if it was real, if my recordings had captured anything. The park rangers found my equipment. They gave it back to me with strange looks, like they knew what I had experienced but could not acknowledge it. I listened to the recordings in my truck, parked at the base of the mountain. The groaning was there, clear and unmistakable, but there was something else too, something I had not noticed while it was happening. Under the main sound, barely audible, were words, or something like words, a language that predated human speech, communicating in frequencies that bypassed the ears and went straight to the brain. And the message was simple and horrible. Help me. Seismographs detected nothing during my night on the mountain. The geological survey confirmed no seismic activity of any kind. According to science, nothing happened. The mountain was silent and stable. But I have the recordings. I have the evidence. And I have this crushing sadness that will not leave. This knowledge I cannot unknow. Other people are experiencing it too. More every week. Park rangers are reporting increased incidents of hikers coming down from Grandfather Mountain in tears, unable to explain why. The local mental health clinic has seen a spike in depression cases, all connected to overnight stays on the mountain. The authorities are investigating environmental factors, carbon monoxide, toxic mold, anything that could explain the pattern. But I know the truth. The mountain is groaning more frequently now. The pain is intensifying. Whatever consciousness lives inside that ancient rock, it is reaching out, trying to communicate its suffering to the only creatures that might understand. And we cannot help it. We cannot free it. We can only feel a tiny fraction of its agony and be broken by it. I am writing this because I need people to know, to understand what is happening on Grandfather Mountain. But more than that, I need to warn them. Do not go there on still nights. Do not listen for the groaning. Because once you hear it, once you truly hear it and understand what it means, you cannot unhear it. The knowledge becomes part of you. The sadness never leaves. I am crying as I write this. I will be crying tomorrow, and the day after, and the day after that. Because I heard the mountain scream, and now I carry a piece of its ancient agony inside me, and there is no cure for understanding something this terrifying and profound. The mountain is still there, still groaning, still suffering, and every night, more people hear it and join me in this horrible awareness. I can feel it even now, 60 miles away from Grandfather Mountain. That vibration, that frequency, it never really stopped. I just learned to hear it all the time. Story 8. Frightful frequency of the Forsaken FM. I am sitting in my car right now, parked outside a police station, but I cannot make myself go inside. My hands are shaking so badly I can barely hold my phone to record this. 3 hours ago, a voice on the radio told me to do something terrifying, and I did it without hesitation. And I need someone to understand what is happening before I lose control completely. This is my true scary story, and I swear every word is real. My name is Robert Chen. I am 38 years old, a long-haul trucker from Sacramento, California. I have been driving these routes for 15 years, crossing every state in America, spending more time on highways than in my own home. The road is my life. The darkness, the endless miles, the solitude. I thought I knew every danger out there. I was wrong. 2 weeks ago, I was driving through Nevada on Interstate 80 at 2 in the morning. Empty desert stretched on both sides, nothing but darkness and distant mountains under a sky so clear you could see every star. My usual radio stations had faded to static, so I started scanning for something, anything, to keep me awake for the next 4 hours to Reno. That is when I found it, 87.3 FM, a frequency that should not exist in that dead zone between stations. The signal came in crystal clear. A man, his voice, smooth and professional, like any late-night DJ you have heard 1,000 times before. He was playing classic rock. Creedence Clearwater Revival, The Doors, music my father used to listen to. Nothing creepy about it at first. Just good music in the middle of nowhere, keeping me company through the dark hours. I remember feeling grateful for the distraction, for that voice cutting through the isolation. Then, between songs, the DJ said something that made my blood run cold. He gave my location, my exact location, mile marker 214 on Interstate 80, eastbound, driving a Kenworth 18-wheeler with California plates. He described my truck perfectly, the chipped paint on the driver's side, the stuffed bear hanging from my rearview mirror, a gift from my daughter. Details no one should know unless they were looking right at me. I checked my mirrors. The highway behind me was empty. No headlights, no cars, just darkness stretching back forever. But someone was watching me. Someone knew exactly where I was and what I was driving. The fear that gripped me then was immediate and primal. I reached for the radio dial to change the station, but my hand stopped. I did not know why. It was like something prevented me from turning it off. The music started again, Tom Petty, Free Falling, and I kept driving, my heart pounding, my eyes darting between the road and my mirrors, searching for whoever was tracking me through that godforsaken desert night. For the next hour, the station played normal music. I started to relax, telling myself it was a coincidence. Maybe the DJ could see traffic cameras. Maybe it was some kind of weird promotional stunt. I had almost convinced myself when the voice came back, and this time, it was different. Darker, more intimate. The DJ described what I was wearing. My blue flannel shirt, my work boots, the coffee stain on my jeans from that morning. Then he mentioned something that made my hands tighten on the steering wheel until my knuckles went white. He talked about the photograph in my wallet. My daughter Emma, smiling at her 8th birthday party. A photograph no one could see unless they were sitting next to me in my truck. I grabbed my wallet and checked. The photo was still there, tucked behind my license where it had always been. But someone had described it perfectly. The pink dress Emma was wearing, the chocolate cake, the balloons in the background. Every single detail exactly right. That is when I understood this was not a normal radio station. This was something else. Something terrifying and inexplicable that had locked onto me, invaded my privacy, and was demonstrating power I could not comprehend. I should have turned off the radio then. Should have pulled over and called the police. But I did not. I kept listening, kept driving, like I was trapped in some horrible nightmare I could not escape. The music continued. Led Zeppelin, Pink Floyd, the Eagles. Classic songs that should have been comforting but now sounded menacing, threatening, like they were being played specifically for me by something that knew me better than I knew myself. And between each song, the DJ came back with more details, more impossible knowledge. He knew I had skipped breakfast that morning, knew I had argued with my wife the night before about money, knew I was planning to quit trucking after this run and find something closer to home. Private thoughts, private conversations, all of it laid bare by that smooth, professional voice coming through my speakers in the dead of night. Mile after mile, the station stayed locked in. No static, no fade, just that perfect, crystal clear signal broadcasting my life back to me like I was the subject of some disturbing documentary. Other drivers started appearing on the highway, their headlights cutting through the darkness. I felt relieved, less alone. But then the DJ mentioned them too. A red Honda Civic passing me on the left. A silver pickup truck 2 miles ahead. A motorcycle approaching from behind. He narrated the entire highway like he could see everything, like the darkness itself had eyes. I pulled into a truck stop outside of Winnemucca around 4 in the morning. I needed to stop, needed to think, needed to figure out what was happening. I parked in the back of the lot, away from other vehicles, and turned off my engine. The radio should have died with it, but it did not. The station kept playing. The music kept coming through my speakers even though my truck was completely off, keys in my hand, battery disconnected from everything. That is when the real horror started. That is when I understood this was not about technology or cameras or some elaborate prank. This was something else entirely. Something that existed outside normal rules. Something that had chosen me for reasons I could not understand. The DJ's voice came back, and this time he was not describing what I was doing. He was describing what I was thinking. My exact thoughts, my fear, my confusion, my desperate need to run. Word for word, he narrated my internal monologue like he was reading directly from my mind. And then he laughed. Not a normal laugh. A cold, knowing sound that made my skin crawl and my stomach turn. I grabbed my phone to call for help, but before I could dial, the DJ spoke again. He told me not to call anyone. Told me to put the phone down. Told me to sit quietly and listen. And I did. God help me. I obeyed without even thinking about it. My hand lowered. My phone went back in my pocket. And I sat there in my dark truck, surrounded by other vehicles and people who could help me, completely paralyzed by a voice on a frequency that should not exist. The music played for another 20 minutes. I recognized every song. They were all favorites of mine, tracks I listened to on long drives, music that reminded me of better times. But now they sounded corrupted, poisoned, turned into something sinister by the context of that frightening frequency. And I realized with growing dread that the station was not just watching me. It was inside me. It knew my memories, my preferences, my entire history. It had access to everything that made me who I am. Then the DJ gave his first command. He told me to drive to a specific location. An abandoned gas station 15 miles south on Highway 95. He told me to go there alone. Told me not to tell anyone. Told me I would understand when I arrived. And even though every rational part of my brain screamed at me to refuse, to drive in the opposite direction, to get help, I found myself starting my truck and pulling out of that parking lot, heading exactly where that terrifying voice had commanded. The drive took 30 minutes. The station played music the entire time, but the DJ did not speak again. Just song after song, each one perfectly chosen to keep me calm, compliant, moving toward whatever horror waited at that abandoned gas station in the middle of the Nevada desert. I passed other vehicles. I saw lit buildings. I had dozens of opportunities to stop, to break free from whatever compulsion had gripped me. But I kept driving. The gas station appeared just before dawn, exactly where the DJ said it would be. A decrepit building with broken windows and a collapsed awning, surrounded by empty desert and dead brush. No other vehicles. No signs of life. Just isolation and decay and the first gray light of morning creeping across the horizon. I parked and sat there, engine running, waiting for instructions I knew were coming. The DJ spoke. He told me to get out of my truck, walk to the gas station, go inside through the broken door, find what was waiting for me. His voice was different now. Excited, anticipatory, like something wonderful was about to happen. And despite every survival instinct telling me to drive away as fast as possible, I opened my door and stepped out into the cold desert air. The inside of the gas station was worse than the outside. Trash everywhere, graffiti on the walls, the smell of decay and animal waste, broken glass crunching under my boots. And in the back corner, barely visible in the dim light, was a radio. An old transistor radio, ancient and corroded, sitting on a rusted shelf like it had been waiting there for decades. The same music I had been hearing in my truck was playing from its tiny speaker. I approached it slowly, my heart hammering in my chest. The radio should not work. There were no batteries inside. No power source, just empty corroded contacts and frayed wires. But it played anyway, that impossible frequency broadcasting through broken speakers, filling the abandoned building with sound that defied explanation. The DJ's voice came through one final time. He thanked me for listening, thanked me for obeying. Then he told me the truth. The frightful frequency was not just a radio station. It was a test, a way of identifying people who could hear it, people who were susceptible to its commands. And I had passed. I was one of them, one of the chosen, one of the ones who could be controlled. He told me I would hear the station again. Soon, anywhere I went, any radio, any speaker, any device capable of receiving signals. The frequency would find me. And when it did, I would receive new commands, new tasks, new tests, and I would obey them all, just like I had obeyed tonight, because something fundamental had changed inside me. Some barrier had been broken. Some resistance had been overcome. Then the radio went silent. The music stopped. The voice disappeared. I stood there in that creepy abandoned gas station as the sun rose, staring at a radio that should not work, understanding that my life had just changed in ways I could not comprehend or escape. I drove back to the interstate in shock. The station was gone from 87.3 FM. Just static. I tried other frequencies, other stations, searching desperately for that voice, needing answers, needing to understand. But there was nothing, just normal radio. Normal music. Normal DJs talking about weather and traffic and news. For 2 weeks, I tried to convince myself it was a hallucination. Exhaustion. Some kind of breakdown. I saw doctors. I took time off from trucking. I stayed home with my family, trying to feel normal again. But I could not shake the fear. The knowledge that something was waiting, that the frequency would return. It came back tonight. I was driving to the grocery store, my daughter in the passenger seat, when the car radio switched stations on its own. 87.3 FM. The same music, the same voice, and the DJ greeted me like an old friend, like no time had passed at all. He knew I had tried to forget, knew I had tried to escape, and he laughed again, that cold, knowing sound that turned my blood to ice. Then he gave me a command. He told me to drive to a specific address across town, told me to go inside, told me to take something that did not belong to me. And I felt that compulsion rising again, that irresistible urge to obey, to do exactly what the terrifying voice commanded no matter the consequences. But this time, my daughter was with me. Emma, my 8-year-old baby girl, sitting beside me and asking why I looked so scared, why my hands were shaking, why I had suddenly turned the car around and was driving in the wrong direction. And I realized with horrible clarity that I was about to commit a crime. About to break into someone's home and steal from them because a voice on an impossible frequency told me to do it. About to destroy my life and traumatize my daughter because I could not resist. I am fighting it right now. Fighting that compulsion with everything I have. That is why I am parked outside this police station, recording this confession, trying to force myself to go inside and tell them everything before I lose control completely. The voice is still playing through my car speakers, still commanding me, still pulling me toward that address like a puppet on strings. Emma is crying. She does not understand what is happening. She wants to go home. And I want to take her there. I want to be a normal father with a normal life. But I can hear the frequency. I can feel its power growing stronger with each passing second. And I know, with absolute certainty, that I am going to obey. I am going to do exactly what it commands, just like I did 2 weeks ago in that desert, because something inside me has been changed, reprogrammed, turned into a receiver for signals I cannot ignore. The most terrifying part is knowing I am not alone. The DJ mentioned others, other listeners, other people who passed the test. How many of us are out there right now, hearing commands through radios and phones and speakers, compelled to obey instructions we do not understand for purposes we cannot comprehend? How many crimes have been committed because of that frightful frequency? How many lives destroyed? I am trying to turn off the radio, but my hand will not move. I am trying to open my door and run inside the police station, but my body will not respond. The compulsion is too strong. The frequency has won, and in a moment, I am going to start my car and drive to that address and do whatever the voice tells me to do, and there is nothing I can do to stop it. If you are reading this, if you find this recording, please understand. I did not want this. I tried to resist, but the frequency is real, and it is out there, and it is looking for more listeners. More people to control, more puppets to command through the darkness. Do not scan for stations in dead zones. Do not listen to frequencies that should not exist, because once you hear it, once that voice locks onto you and learns everything about you, there is no escape. You become part of something bigger, something terrifying, something that uses music and commands and compulsion to turn normal people into instruments of some purpose we cannot understand. The voice is giving me the address again. My hands are moving to the ignition. Emma is begging me to stop, and I cannot. God help me, I cannot stop. The frequency has me now, and it will never let me go. Story 9. Thing I saw reflected in the water wasn't to my face. I'm telling you this story because I need someone to know what happened up there in the mountains. And because every night since, I wake up hearing those whispers calling my name from somewhere deep beneath the surface. What I experienced at the drowning pools was the most terrifying encounter of my life. And I'm still not sure I really escaped. My name is David, and I am a field researcher for the U.S. Geological Survey. Last September, I was sent alone into the Cascade Range to investigate water quality reports from several high-altitude ponds. The assignment seemed routine. Collect samples, document GPS coordinates, file my findings. I'd been doing this work for 12 years. I thought I'd seen every kind of terrain these mountains could offer. I was wrong. The locals in the small town where I picked up supplies kept giving me strange looks when I mentioned the northern ridge coordinates. An older man at the gas station, maybe 70 with weathered hands and suspicious eyes, asked me flat out if I was heading to what he called the drowning pools. When I showed him my map, he just shook his head and told me that livestock had been disappearing up there for decades. He said the water wasn't right, that those ponds were evil, cursed. I smiled politely and thanked him, writing it off as small-town superstition. Mountain folklore, the kind of creepy stories people tell to scare outsiders. I should have listened. The hike took me 6 hours, climbing through dense pine forest that gradually thinned as I gained elevation. By mid-afternoon, I reached a plateau at around 9,000 feet. The landscape opened into a strange, flat expanse of gray rock and sparse vegetation. And that is when I saw them. 3 perfectly circular ponds spaced about 200 yards apart. Their surfaces so dark they looked like holes punched into the earth itself. The silence hit me first. No birds, no insects, no wind rustling through the scattered brush. Just an eerie, oppressive quiet that made my footsteps sound impossibly loud against the stone. The air felt wrong too, heavier somehow, pressing against my chest with each breath. I stood there staring at those ponds, and something deep in my gut told me to turn around and leave. But I had a job to do, and I hiked 6 hours to get there. I approached the nearest pond. The water was absolutely still, like black glass. As I got closer, I noticed the edges, perfectly circular, almost machined in their precision. No natural pond forms a perfect circle. Erosion, weather, geology, they all create irregular shapes. But these 3 pools were flawless circles, each one maybe 40 feet across. I pulled out my depth finder, a handheld sonar device we use to map underwater topography. I pointed it at the surface and pressed the trigger. Nothing. I tried again, adjusting the settings, checking the battery. The device was working fine, but it couldn't find a bottom. The readout just showed error messages, like the water descended beyond the instrument's range. That was impossible. My depth finder could measure down to 300 feet. I moved around the edge, trying different angles. Same result. No bottom, no echo, just darkness going down and down. That's when I noticed something disturbing in the water near the edge. Bones, small ones, scattered along what should have been the shallow area near the rim. I crouched down, careful not to get too close, and recognized them as animal bones, ribs, vertebrae, parts of skulls. Dozens of them, maybe more, all concentrated within the first few feet of the pool, this edge, as if animals had waded in and never came back out. The old man, his words came back to me. Livestock vanishing. I felt a chill crawl up my spine despite the afternoon sun. I needed to collect a water sample. That was the whole point of being here. I unpacked my sampling equipment and attached a collection bottle to my extendable pole. I told myself I was being paranoid, that this was just unusual geology, that there was a rational explanation for everything. But my hands were shaking as I extended the pole over the water. The moment the bottle touched the surface, I heard it. A whisper, faint, distant, but unmistakable. It seemed to rise from the depths of the pool, a sound like wind through a crack in the earth, except it formed something close to words. I froze, pole still extended, listening. The whisper came again, clearer this time, and my blood went cold because I swear it said my name. David. I yanked the pole back, stumbling away from the edge. My heart hammered against my ribs. The water sample bottle had filled, but I barely noticed. I was staring at that black surface, and the horrifying realization hit me that something down there knew I was here. Something was aware of me. The whisper came again, louder now, echoing up from the depths. David. Multiple voices, overlapping, male and female, young and old, all saying my name in perfect unison. The sound wrapped around me, seemed to come from inside my own head. I should have run. Every survival instinct I had screamed at me to leave that plateau immediately. But I was paralyzed by fear and something else, something worse. A pull, a compulsion. I found myself taking a step toward the water, then another, like invisible hands were guiding me forward. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, and beneath them I could hear other sounds. Wet sounds, like something moving through deep water. Rising. 20 feet from the edge, I managed to stop myself. I dug my boots into the rock and fought against that terrible pull with everything I had. Sweat poured down my face. My muscles burned with the effort of not moving forward. And then I made the mistake of looking directly into the water. What I saw wasn't a reflection. The surface showed a face, but it wasn't mine. It was pale, bloated, eyes wide and mouth open in a silent scream. As I watched in horror, more faces appeared beside it. Dozens of them, hundreds maybe, all pressed against the underside of the water like people drowning beneath ice. Men, women, children, their features distorted and decayed, but their eyes horribly alive, staring up at me with desperate hunger. The pull intensified. My feet scraped forward an inch, then another. I couldn't look away from those faces. They were moving now, swimming upward through the darkness, getting closer to the surface. The whispers became screams. Thousands of voices shrieking my name, begging me to join them, to step into the water, to sink down into that bottomless darkness where I would never be alone again. I broke. I don't remember clearly what happened next. I think I screamed. I know I turned and ran, abandoning my equipment, my samples, everything. I ran across that gray plateau with the screams chasing me, ran until I hit the tree line and kept running, branches tearing at my face and clothes. Behind me, I heard a sound like rushing water, like something massive breaking the surface, and I ran faster than I've ever run in my life. I didn't stop until I was a mile down the mountain, gasping for air, legs shaking so badly I collapsed against a tree. Only then did I realize something disturbing. I was soaking wet. My clothes, my hair, my boots, everything was drenched, but it hadn't rained. The water was ice cold and smelled like decay, like something that had been sitting stagnant for centuries. I hadn't touched the pool. I hadn't fallen in. But somehow, the water had touched me. The hike down took me until well after dark. I kept hearing things in the forest behind me. Footsteps that weren't mine, branches breaking, and worst of all, that wet sliding sound like something dragging itself through the undergrowth. Twice I spun around and saw nothing but darkness and trees. But I felt watched, followed, hunted. I made it to my truck just before midnight. As I fumbled with my keys, hands still shaking, I noticed something that made my stomach drop. There were wet footprints on the hood of my vehicle, leading from the front bumper up to the windshield. Small circular prints, perfectly round, like someone had stood there on the hood in bare feet. But the prints were filled with that same black water, and as I watched, they began to bubble and steam, evaporating into the night air. I drove away so fast I nearly wrapped the truck around a tree on the first curve. The next morning, I tried to file my report, but when I pulled up the GPS coordinates, they showed nothing but solid rock. No ponds, no water, nothing. The satellite imagery revealed only empty plateau. My supervisor thought I'd gotten turned around, mixed up my locations. He suggested I take a few days off, maybe see someone about the stress of solo fieldwork. But I know what I saw. I know what I heard. 3 weeks later, a rancher reported losing 15 head of cattle near that northern ridge. Search teams found them scattered across the plateau. Every single one drowned, their lungs full of water, lying dead on dry ground a quarter-mile from the nearest stream. The official report called it a flash flood, but I checked the weather data. There hadn't been rain for 2 weeks. I dream about those pools every night now. In the dreams, I'm standing at the edge, looking down into that bottomless darkness, and the faces are calling me. Sometimes I'm walking into the water. Sometimes I'm already under, sinking, and the faces surround me with their white hands reaching, pulling me deeper. I wake up gasping, sheets soaked through with water that smells like decay. Last week, I found something that confirmed my worst fear. I was doing laundry and checked the pockets of the pants I wore that day. Inside, I found a small stone, perfectly smooth and circular. I didn't remember picking it up, but when I held it under the light, I could see something inside it. Shapes, moving, like faces pressed against dark glass. Mouths open in silent screams. The stone was wet. It was always wet. I've tried throwing it away, but it keeps coming back. In my pocket, on my nightstand, in my truck, this cup holder. And every time I find it, I hear the whispers again, faint but getting louder, calling my name from somewhere deep and dark and hungry. The pools are spreading. I can feel them pulling at me even now, hundreds of miles away, like they marked me, claimed me, and it was only a matter of time. Sometimes I catch myself driving north without meaning to, my hands on the wheel guiding me back toward those mountains. I have to physically force myself to turn around. The compulsion is getting stronger. The whispers are getting clearer. And every morning when I look in the mirror, my reflection seems a little paler, a little more bloated, like I am already drowning. I don't think I'm going to make it to next month. The pull is too strong, and I'm so tired of fighting it. But I needed to tell someone what happened up there, to warn anyone who might stumble across those pools. Don, to look into the water. Don, to listen to the whispers. And if you see perfectly circular ponds high in the mountains, ponds with no bottom and water like black glass, turn around and run, because something down there is waiting, and it is always hungry for one more face to add to the darkness beneath the surface, one more voice to join the screaming chorus that echoes up from depths that have no end. And I can hear them calling even now as I write this, saying my name, telling me to come home, come down, come join them in the drowning pools where the water never stops pulling you deeper